Chris. Chris, are you there?
I certainly am. Can you hear me and see me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Can you see me now?
I can indeed. How are you?
I'm absolutely fantastic, thank you. Tremendous presentations going on and sounding really fantastic with donations to the NHS. So thank you. Brilliant.
Let's have a quick look to what we're at so far. Let's refresh the page. We're at £4,421, including gift aid, over £5,000 raised so far. And let's face it, we're a couple of hours into the event. And, you know, things are just getting going. So it looks like we're going to raise a lot of money for the guys at the NHS.
I'm really looking forward to that. And if we can hit 10,000, brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of your slot, have you got a presentation prepared?
I have, but I'm not going to show it because I've got problems with my internet connection. So I'm on my telephone at the moment. Virgin, unfortunately, they're doing some emergency work in the pavement and I've lost my internet. So it's I'm on my telephone at the moment.
Okay, perfect. What we'll do is run through kind of, so I know you've got the presentation prepared. The best way to do this, just kind of like, what we'll do is we'll freestyle and almost run through the presentation without the slides, just so people get the content and we can run through what you would otherwise be covering.
Yeah, the slides aren't imperative, to be quite honest.
Yeah. Perfect. So for those who don't know you, would you be able to kind of introduce yourself quickly, what you're about, what the Hamilton Partnership's all about, and what it is you do?
Absolutely. Okay, so for the people that don't know me, I think many people on here do know me. It's Chris Hamilton. I arrived in the UK in July 2015, and I went straight into commercial property. So I got into property in 2004 with construction. I've got a number of fairly iconic jobs in my background. Probably the biggest was 4.2 billion. That was billion, not million, by the way. That was in Muscat, Oman. So it's 4,500 properties, some hotels, a golf course, a marina, schools, shopping centre, etc. And obviously a section of like a miniature Venice with waterways as well. And basically, I've just gone from project to project, including things like Shangri-La hotels, literally thousands and thousands of individual residences as well as some major commercial developments of office buildings, government buildings, military, waste disposal, a fairly broad spectrum. There's a number I haven't mentioned because they are fairly insignificant. Biggest building I did as a single building was 52 stories, and we built 3 of those in parallel to each other. So reasonably good experience in my background, and of massive benefit is the fact that I was fortunate enough to actually be there on the build site. So I learned an awful lot at the time as well as things like project management. So my qualifications are appropriate as well, project management and engineering degrees as well. That was my 3rd career, by the way, but we'll leave it at that. You know a little bit about the rest, but we won't go through that. So what I really want to talk about, obviously, is the opportunities that I can foresee coming up in the future. So are we good to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, keep on doing. We're live now. Over 300 people tuning in. So yeah, just get stuck in.
Well, welcome to the 300 people. Let's hope it's going to be a good, useful hour for you. And I think that we've got the last 15 minutes for questions. So if you've got questions as well as I go through, maybe we should hit them at the time. Would that be okay with you, Joshua?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're here monitoring the questions, so we can just address those as and when they come up.
If you've got any questions, guys, just fire them away, because otherwise we tend to lose the thread and they seem less relevant, possibly right at the end. So I like to take questions as we go through. Well, at the moment, one of the things that we're all aware of is the lockdown. And with the lockdown, 90% of people appear to be working from home now. So I'm seeing this, besides I think a lot of people seeing it as an advantage on home life. One of the other big advantages is that basically we've escalated we've brought forward the timeframes, and we've all been talking about working from home now for several years. And through this, we've actually just brought this whole thing, we've zoomed it forward to 2020. So I actually see this from a commercial buildings point of view. I see it as a massive advantage. So one of the advantages, of course, is that I'm already seeing with a number of my friends that are not in the property business, is that they are now working from home, and there's a very good probability that these positions are going to be maintained, and they in the future they'll basically be working from home forever from now on. Now, obviously, we don't know that that's absolutely fact, but that's the supposition that's coming forward. And one of the things that comes out of this is that with companies now home sourcing work, is obviously the downsizing of office space that's required. If you've got a company with 60 or 80 employees in it, and 70% of those are now working from home or hot desking when they do come in, it's obviously common sense that the powers that be within those organizations are going to reduce and restrict the amount of office space that they actually need. So they are going to downsize. That could well be just an issue of giving up part of the space they've got if they're in a multi-story building, or if they have a whole building, they might be selling it or moving on to alternative premises. Regardless of which, there's going to be a shed load of empty floors available. And that's obviously going to transmit eventually and transform itself into empty buildings. And I don't think we're going to be waiting a long time for this. I can see this happening before the end of this year, probably even sooner in a lot of instances. It's obviously going to be dependent upon how much or how long tenancy agreements are signed up for, and whether or not it's a vendor-occupied building. But these buildings are going to become more and more available. One of the upshots here, going further forward, is that for the last, probably since 2015, we've seen very high prices, since 2016 in particular, where offices have just gone up and up and up in price to the value that, in some instances, it's actually not worth converting them to residential. It's actually better to retain them because of the office space going into shortages, and floor rental costs, of course, have risen disproportionately, that it's actually, you can't actually get an economic solution to converting it to residential. And whilst I'm seeing a lot of buildings still available, people that, HPG also do training, Joshua, but people that we're training, unless they've got a very good understanding of how a building can be utilised, they're struggling to find buildings that can convert economically and still turn in, obviously, the magic 20% profit at the end. So people have been struggling, who are new to the industry, to identify realistic buildings. So one of the opportunities I'm seeing out of this is that there's going to be a lot of buildings coming onto the market, commercial buildings, and it's not just offices. We're now seeing it with people doing their shopping much more online than ever. We're now seeing supermarkets delivering virtually as standard. I'm talking to people in supermarkets, and most of them now are doing 70%, 80% of their shopping online. So even the mega-sized supermarkets, there's a probability that a lot of those are going to shrink as well, as people tend to do more and more shopping online. So we're not only looking at offices, we're also looking at shops as well, retail. We're all seeing a decline in the high street. That's been going on for several years with people like Amazon. But now with more and more shopping going online as well, I can foresee a large number of shops closing down and relocating into a warehouse type distribution system. So that's, again, some massive opportunities. If a major supermarket closes down, major supermarkets tend to have major car parking. So there's significant opportunities coming forward. Now, if we go on to other factors in the commercial world as well, we're going to see more and more opportunities. So I do foresee some really significant benefits to us. The problem we're going to have going further forward is, obviously at the moment, is planning. And with the planning and permitted development's already reasonably well defined. But the problem we've got is it's also closed, and there's a significant number of caveats. So typically, to get a commercial conversion through the planning department using PD, there's 4 significant caveats. Things like noise, highways, which is mainly to do with parking. Environmental issues come up a lot as well in those items, but there's 4 significant items which we have to satisfy, including flooding, of course. But if we can actually get those items addressed and enhanced, particularly when we're near a community centre for traffic as well, a lot of the other issues go away. And the issues with car parking, if you're in a town centre area, obviously with the less need to actually drive to work because you're now working from home, if you're near a transport hub, logically a lot of these problems go away. So again, I can foresee significant changes are required to planning and to upgrade them to recognise the current situation. So staying on that strategy at the moment, I've been speaking to a number of my colleagues, some planning people, architects, etc. And one of the things we're doing, this is maybe it's slightly off subject, but we're trying to form a pressure group to persuade the government to review planning. Not just to review it, but to take them a proposal that we can actually move further forward with development works. So the reason I'm mentioning on this chat is that it basically brings us all more opportunities as well. So obviously the benefits there to the government are increased employment opportunities with construction, but the main benefit, of course, is to the housing market. So if we are actually able to bring more affordable housing to the market, more 1 and 2 beds, which is where we believe that the larger market lies, we'll be enabling people to actually get onto the housing market. And who better to fulfill that than people that are watching this podcast with you? So the opportunity I see coming further forward for, there's over 300 people watching, I believe, at the moment. So immediately, people that can start to change maybe their strategy thinking, this is a fantastic opportunity. So just talking about strategies, Joshua, at the moment, I struggle to see a strategy that's more commercially viable. So in straight language, pounds in your bank account, I cannot see a strategy that is stronger than commercial conversions. It certainly does have, obviously, a number of risks, and there's usually delayed financial gratification until you've completed. But we do obviously finance ourselves out through the project going further forward on this. So if anybody looks around wherever they live, their nearest town, or if they're in a town, the town itself, just have a look at how many offices there are. They might be based above small shops, they might be above major retail units, or more likely, they're freestanding office buildings. So wherever you are in the country, you do have opportunities either on your doorstep or extremely close to you. And my thoughts are just look out for the signs to let that are going to be popping up in the next 6 months, this year. And those buildings are probably, if they're small offices, they might be taken over by major companies and major organizations as they wish to obviously occupy smaller properties, but where have they relocated from? So I live in South Buckinghamshire, and I'm already seeing, speaking to the local commercial agent, I'm already seeing opportunities pop up locally to me. One building that I looked at 2 years ago, which was priced at over 4 million, has now come down to 1.8 million pounds.
Wow.
It's more than a 50% drop in 2 years, because the owner was convinced he was going to do extremely well out of it. But of course, he's paying business rates the whole time. So he's paying thousands, it's over £10,000 a month he's paying in business rates. It's a huge, huge property. It will convert to about 400 flats, but it's draining him of resources every month. So we do have a very significant opportunity coming up here. The other issue, of course, is for local authorities. Every local authority is behind on its housing needs. You're looking poised. Is there a question coming through?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions through now. We've got one from Raquel. So Debenhams, they're kind of closing down everywhere, and the high street, it's quite tricky, if not impossible, to convert those into residential a lot of the time. So how could you monetize, kind of build empty buildings, such as the case of Debenhams?
Okay, in case of something like Debenhams are usually multi-story, and you'll certainly struggle, Raquel, if you're trying to buy Debenhams in Oxford Street. So I think that would be a bit of a challenge. But a lot of the other Debenhams around the country, yes, they're always high street, but I can foresee them being given planning permission hopefully under revised PD, that all the upper floors, not the ground floor, not the ground floor shopping area, but I can foresee the areas above it being available to be converted to, probably, if it's a Debenhams, very good quality residential units. Perhaps you would buy the whole shop and you'd be looking to convert the ground floor, perhaps to serviced offices. Usually Debenhams are located on transport hubs. So we could convert the ground floor to serviced offices and rent those out individually, very similar to serviced accommodation, but as office use, and convert the spaces above it to residential flats. And I believe you do extremely well financially by doing so. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it's a fantastic answer. I think as soon as we get off this, I'll be going to find some vacant Debenhams. So in terms of financing commercial to residential conversion, is there a best way? What's your kind of thoughts on the best way to finance them?
That's a brilliant question. Yes, if you're a newbie to the property market, you are definitely going to struggle. It's relatively simple, to be quite honest. It's easier to get a commercial loan if you're a newbie on a building that's sub £1 million than it is to go and get a mortgage. Now, a lot of people will say, well, I've got no money and I've got no deposits. What can I do? And actually, that is not such a difficult question to overcome. When I first started, I was in a very similar position as well. And a lot of other people I've worked with have been in the same position. So you have two options. On that particular instance, either look at buying sub £1 million purchase price, obviously with a sufficient margin at the outer end, and we'll talk about that in a moment. If you're buying at sub 1 million and you've got a reasonable amount of equity from perhaps an investor that you're giving a very good deal to, you should not have any problems experienced to actually get the finance. There's myself, there's a lot of other people that provide assistance and help and training that can also assist with items like that. We joint venture with a lot of our students to enable them to get onto the conversion market. Doesn't mean you have to joint venture, but if you want to purchase over £1 million, you'll probably find it easier to JV with somebody that's got a track record rather than trying to go in on your own. It's much harder. It's possible, but it's much harder to do it if you haven't got a track record, because the risk is obviously significant then for the senior debt provider. But if you can purchase below £1 million and your GDV is appropriate with sufficient profit on it, you should not have a problem getting finance. So you need a bit of equity. You need to have a project that's sub 1 million, and you should be able to go forward and get finance. More than £1 million purchase price, I'd strongly suggest joint venturing with somebody with a strong track record. Just talking on that same subject, one of the biggest problems pre the lockdown was people advertise. You got sources that advertise properties that really, unfortunately, they don't know what the GBV should be. They tend to look at very high values and populate their spreadsheets, if they do a spreadsheet with very high values, and they tend to underestimate the construction and development costs. And therefore you end up with a deal analyzer that is really inflated. And it's probably too long-winded to go into it here, but the risk on that is much more serious than people will realize, because you'll end up going into legals, perhaps spending £35,000 before you discover, the senior debt people discover, that the figures don't add up, by which stage you've spent typically £30,000 and you walk away with zero. So the risk there is significant. You must understand what you're looking at.
Yeah, fantastic. As a fantastic answer. Hopefully that helped. It's certainly, learning a lot there. So I've got Joy. Is it always best to buy? Obviously, it's always best to buy with planning or subject to. Would you ever buy anything without planning, or is it too risky?
I buy all my buildings so far, except one, have been bought without planning. So I use permitted development. So Joy, permitted development allows you to do, it's similar on a house. If you've got a semi-detached or a terraced property, you can extend at ground floor by 6 meters, as long as it doesn't take up more than 50% of the land space as it stood in 1948, or when it was built, if it's post 1948. Similar rights exist for permitted development on commercial buildings. So typically an office building is B1A, and B1A comes with automatic permitted development as long as you meet the criteria of 4 items. So as long as you meet those 4, it's automatically got approval rights on it. So most, I shouldn't say, it's actually been 3 buildings we've bought now without PD, but all the others I've bought have been subject to PD. Office is a favourite because it's a very easy one to do, and post 1980 they generally tend to be built with frames on them, so you can do internal conversion work without major construction or structural activity. Pre-1980 they very often tend to be structural walls inside as well. The issue you have, again, when you're buying through a sourcer, is the sources don't always recognise opportunities or the costs involved with changing them around. So we've looked at buildings before that have been Regency period or Victorian period buildings, and of course all of those buildings are structural inside. So those have significant costs to take the walls out and replace with steel work. You need to know what you're doing. But if you're looking at the issue now with commercial buildings, I believe we're going to see a lot more value where commercial building owners have to get rid of the buildings because of the costs involved in maintaining an empty building, or one that we believe is going to have reduced staff usage in. So if you look at your typical multi-storey building, let's just call it 4 or 5 storey building, that's an office building, very easy to convert to residential. The office owner is probably going to be downsizing to maybe 1 floor, 1 story out of his 6. You might well be able to do a deal with the same guy that he stays and maintains the ground floor, maybe like the Debenhams type story, where Debenhams hand over to an alternative shop provider and you convert the entire area above it, or you just take and convert the whole building. The big benefit with offices is they generally come with car parking, and that's a massive benefit, obviously, to anybody purchasing a flat. I hope that helps, Joy. If you've got another question, Joy, just whack it through.
Yeah, they're all coming through now. So hotel conversions, hotel to residential, how easy is it as not permitted development?
It's not permitted development, it's C1. It's not that easy. At the moment, this is one of the items, Josh, that we were talking about, that we want to be able to go to the government, to the planning, and try and get changes to get things like hotels, care homes, other items that are considered essential to the community to be converted into residential. So besides hotels, hotels obviously lend themselves superbly well to flat conversions, because all the additional plumbing that you normally require is already in place. You're normally capping them off rather than extending. So the amount of electricity, your utilities, your drainage, car parking again is normally all in place. So a hotel is superb to convert. The reason that the local municipalities, the local councils do not like them converted is it's a loss of a local utility. It brings tourism to the area. But we're in property, so we can see the benefits of converting those into residential, but by the same token, it will give other people with things like serviced accommodation, which is very popular with the public, it will give ideal opportunity to other people with serviced accommodation to benefit from that as well. So again, it comes down to having a bit of a pressure point on the government, which is at the right time at the moment, to ask them to look at changing PD requirements and enabling them, as well as converting. Planning can take 3-4 years, and of course it is extremely expensive. And at the end of the day, with planning, you're not just talking to the council themselves, you've also got the items or people like the councillors in the council that can change a planning decision. So that's beyond my understanding, how one individual can actually have sway over the planning department. Typically, we looked at one building, it was a pub. The entire planning department wanted it converted, as did the local community. And the outcome of that was one councillor objected in the council meeting because he had drunk there when he was a teenager. I mean, he was older than God's grandfather, this guy. And we were just stopped from doing it. And it took 2 years to overcome his objections. And of course, the amount of money tied up and interest payments are significant. So we got permission through in the end. And that's with the planning department's support, but one councillor stopped it. So we do have, I can't say it's broken, because if it's broken, it's got to be intact in the first place. And I don't think the planning department in any council has ever been intact. There's too much preferential engineering goes on, but that's political. It's not really for this conference. But we do want to raise that. We do want to get planning permitted development upgraded. And hopefully the 300 odd people listening here, when the petition is raised later this year, hopefully we will get their signatures as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of pub conversions, I know you mentioned you did one. Pubs, is that something you tend to look at, or do you find that is a lot of hassle and a lot of rigmarole to get planning to convert pubs into residential units?
Well, there is a strategy that you can actually change pubs into residential. It's not taking the direct approach. So there is a strategy. Colin Smith, if people know Colin Smith, is a proponent of this. It's whereby you actually take the pub and the licensing of the pub, if you get it changed to a restaurant, because most pubs convert and provide food, hot food. So you can actually get the license changed from a pub license to a restaurant license. That doesn't take long to do normally. And then at least you can convert the upstairs area without any issues. And of course, once you've established the use upstairs, it's not that difficult normally to convert the lower areas. So it's a question of swerving through the planning requirements to overcome the objections. But a pub is normally considered an asset of a local community value. So normally, if there's particularly if it's the last pub in the area, it's actually quite difficult to get it converted. If there's multiple pubs in the area, you stand a very good opportunity of receiving planning permission. Again, typically where I live, we have lots of pubs, and one particular pub, as most pubs that go empty, it's got to be empty for a minimum of 2 years, by the way, and advertised for 2 years. But the local community asset was deemed to be critical to the area. even though there were several pubs within 300 metres in several directions. The council still objected, and you've probably seen this signs. Most pubs that are empty for a period of time suffer very unfortunate fires around the 2.5 years of being empty. So typically we went to buy a pub in Manchester, and it suffered a really severe fire with the roof being burnt down whilst we were trying to buy it, and at the point we were looking at pulling out. And we pulled out in the end because of the fire, and the fire completely destroyed the roof. But it did enable planning to go through quite swiftly after that. So it's an unfortunate event that these buildings do seem to suffer dreadful destruction at some point after the 2 years is up. But generally, I avoid pubs. They're too difficult, they're too challenging, they're too expensive. Too expensive in planning terms. It can take an easy 2 years to get planning. And the cost of the finance for that 2 years can have a really detrimental effect on your profit margin.
Perfect. I was just taking notes down now, scribbling away. So we've got some more questions come through. So with buildings like Debenhams, isn't there a lack of windows? So...
Well, potentially. It depends on the depth of the building. So if the Debenhams is freestanding, then usually to the left and the right, you are going to have problems with natural light. Again, it depends on how many stories the building is as to whether or not you can bring light in from above. Now, if it's a big square building, let's just say it's a 60-metre frontage, so sort of 200 foot by 200 foot, and it's multi-storey, and to the left and to the right of it, we have buildings. There is a way you can get light into the sides and into the middle, and that's by creating an atrium. So if you put a central atrium, a central well in, then you can bring light flooding in from above. And that way you can create a courtyard effect, which obviously is far more attractive to the owners, the residents as well of the flats. It's a question of how you look at the building. So a lot of people don't see the opportunities that could be there. But obviously, you'll be giving up floor space for community area by creating that central atrium. I'm not aware of many people doing that. It's something that we do, and it's something we look at and consider. But obviously, it will affect the GDV. It will go down. So also, when you're looking at full planning, you have a difference in space restrictions. So one of the benefits of permitted development is that we're not constrained by national space standards. So at the moment, national space standards stipulate, I'm not sure if many people are aware of the national space standard, but for a 1-bedroom flat with one person, it's 37 square meters. For a 2-person flat, it's 50 square meters. And the difference between a 1-person flat and a 2-person flat is not the double bed or the price. It's actually the mortgageability. You probably know this doing your job, but it's the mortgageability. They'll take one person's salary into account or 2 people's salaries into account. Under permitted development, we can actually build a flat of any size and they will take 2 people's salaries into account. So we can actually build a flat that's just say 30 meters below the national average. Can you see me okay? Sorry, my phone.
Yeah, I think we kind of dropped that for a second, but yeah, we're all good now.
Yeah, sorry, it's an incoming phone call. So the problem that we have, the benefit we have, sorry, not the problem, the benefit we have is we're not constrained under PD of the size of the flat we create. But if we go full planning, then yes, we are. We have to follow the national space standard. So typically a 1-bedroom under national space standards is 50 square meters. Under what we do, that will be a 2-bedroom flat. And obviously the value of ours is much higher than under the planning. So financially, it's significantly more beneficial to us. And obviously we can serve the public better, particularly first-time buyers. So just talking of first-time buyers, Josh, before the next question comes through, is I think many people are aware that Help to Buy is due to expire next year. And the one thing that's coming out of this, obviously, is that people who are working from home are going to be looking probably for more spacious flats. So currently, under PD, we will typically be producing 32, 34 square metre one-bedroom flats. One of the items I'll be looking at going further forward on this is for myself, suggestion for other people, is that those one-bedroom flats really will need to have office space built into them if people are going to be working from home. And I can see that at the moment, my 34 square metre bedroom flat is probably going to be transformed into a 40 square metre flat, because there will be an area dedicated to a dual working space, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife type, or partnership arrangement, to each that they've got a dedicated work space. More and more people working from home, it makes logical sense to provide them the facilities to actually be able to sit down and have a dedicated workspace, rather than trying to work off the sofa or a small dining room table. So I'm going to be looking at how we address that going further forward. I think it'll be a major selling point particularly for starter homes. And I'm expecting, with more people working from home, I really expect the first-time buyer help to be extended, but also possibly more financial help, whether that be, I don't necessarily think they need to be able to borrow more money in the terms of a flat that was 250 being extended to 300. Help to Buy stops at 650, by the way. But I do believe that we're going to see a small devaluation in flat prices, but potentially an increase in Help to Buy percentage by the government. So I can actually see it changing from 20 or 40%. I can see it going to 50%, and potentially 50% across the board, not just by region. It will encourage house building, and obviously people like ourselves doing development, but the amount of help it will give to first-time buyers is going to improve the market. I'm not sure where the government's going to get all the money from at this stage, but I can see maybe stamp duty. With more people buying properties, perhaps they'll be raising it from stamp duty, or assisting with stamp duty, or maybe stamp duty will be kept more manageable for the buyers, which will also help them, of course. But I do see some significant changes in the Help to Buy first-time buyers scenario, which is not, obviously, it's good at the moment, but I can only see it getting better. We just touched on, by the way, house values, property values. You're probably aware that people like, maybe I shouldn't mention the name, actually I will mention it, Savills, for instance, keep releasing reports. And 10 days ago, they released a report saying they foresee very little change in the property market. Last week, end of last week, they released another report saying they can see it going down 13.5%, which I thought was a very unusual figure to come up with. And then only last night, they came up with another report saying expect up to 30% reduction in the market. And frankly, I think the first report was okay. Potentially even the second one, even though it's a bit weird number, is a little bit too specific. But yesterday's, are you going to sell your property if it reduces by 30%? Not unless the property you're buying up market is dropped by a similar amount. But the people that are selling up market are probably downsizing, so they're not going to accept that. So I frankly don't accept a 30% property market crash. People will just sit on their fingers and wait. And I don't believe it's sustainable at that level at all. The result of which I'd also see, at the moment, we're at basically zero inflation, interest rates. I don't see that being sustainable. I think that's got to change in the next, certainly within a year. It's got to go up. We can't sustain this at the moment. The upshot of that, of course, is senior debt providers are also in the same position. So if you look at the financial market, and I don't know how other people are looking at this, but people are being very negative about house values and about interest rates. But at the moment, with such low interest rates at 0.01, then we are looking at significant amounts of money, serious money that's held by the senior banks. How are they going to make their money? So the way they make money is to lend it to people like the 300 people listening on this webcast. So people like myself will continue to borrow money. We'll be borrowing money not from people like Lloyd's, the high street banks. We will continue with the challenger banks. And the challenger banks are typically lending money, depending on who you are. So let's just say 7 or 8%. So if you're sitting with a significant amount of money, millions, who are you going to put it with? The challenger bank or with Lloyd's or Barclays or National Westminster? You're obviously going to be putting it with the senior debt providers, and they are paying you, I'm guessing, 2-3%, whilst they take 5% for themselves. They've got to lend the money. And I foresee this again as a significant benefit to people who are purchasing commercial conversions. If it's a robust number that you're working around, then yes, you've got a very significant opportunity to transform a small amount of money into a significant pot of money. And that can certainly be, typically we're talking about a year to 18 months to realize that. And normally we're looking to make at least a 20% return profit. And that's after all finances. And that's obviously, that finances is not per annum, it's over the lifetime of that project. So that's the amount of money we're really looking at raising. So if we're looking at buying a building for £1 million, the GDV is 3 million, we're looking at a minimum of £600,000 profit after your senior debt has been paid back. So though we're talking very, very significant amounts of money. That's usually, say, over a year to 18 months. What are the other items that we should be talking about? Any other questions, by the way?
Yeah, so off the back of that, so you mentioned GDV. What's the best way to work out GDV on a conversion, especially where it's mixed commercial and a bit of residential? Okay,
where it's a mixed use, it's obviously a lot more hard than standard residential. You really need to find out, and you're going to see more and more commercial units becoming available. So one of the strategies is looking at serviced office space as opposed to retail units. So depending on where the building is, obviously it depends on the type of retail you're going to be putting in the bottom. You're still going to see the likes of Sainsbury's, Tesco's. A number of their shops, I do believe, will close, but obviously a lot of them will remain open because a lot of people want to go and touch and look. But I do foresee the opportunity for Sainsbury's stroke Tesco's and the big supermarkets to actually downsize and go for more of the metro type outlets. So I would be approaching the metro type outlets to see if they're interested in renting your space. That will give you a value. But I would also be talking to people like gymnasiums and obviously the retail on things like coffee shops, I think the sandwich shops, that a lot of those are going to be, I think, growing in size. When I say size, not physical size, but the numbers of them. So we're going to see more and more organizations where offices are shrinking in size. They're going to need to be serviced with better facilities. So gymnasiums and fast food stroke coffee shops, or maybe a combination of serviced office with a coffee shop as well, combined. So people can go in, rent a workspace for the hour or the day, and they can work in a small environment served with hot food and hot drinks. So I can see this changing as an office environment completely. There will still be the opportunities, of course, for standard offices, but I think workspace renting is going to be on the boom. So to value that, you really need to identify what is going to be renting your lower ground floor space. If it's residential, of course, we know what the values are going to be. We can see that. I'm valuing my residential downwards by around 15 to 18% at the moment. So a flat that at the moment is £200,000, you need to drop about 30k off the price, your expectation, to facilitate where we're going to be when we come to sell that project in about 18 months' time. So we do need to allow for that. I would be looking at who is going to be renting the retail space, the commercial space, whether it's going to be office use, restaurant, cafe, service offices. You'll need to take a steer on that from your local commercial agent to get the values. People tend to forget also, once they've built the building, there's a significant value in the commercial aspect with regards to the freehold, and also when you're buying the building, into capital allowances as well, things that you're well positioned to advise people on. So a lot of people don't realize the values of either the of both those items, the freehold and the tax benefits of capital allowances. But I happen to know an accountant that's well positioned to advise on that. I think I can see him at the moment looking at me out the screen. So
yeah, we've got a presentation on that later on today as well. After Kemp, he'll be running through all of the capital allowances.
He's very good. Yes, totally endorse him. So I'm not going to take his glory away. I'll leave it to Arthur. But yeah, he's a good guy. Perfectly positioned to do that. So work out your GDV. What people tend to forget is when you've worked out your GDV, that is not it. It will go to the senior debt. It will go to their solicitors, and their solicitors in turn have a QS, a monitoring surveyor, that will come up with their own assessments and their own valuations. So if you stretch it, you will find you come undone very rapidly when those monitoring surveyors get involved and give their valuations through the solicitors back to the senior debt provider. Very difficult to challenge those people. So when you are doing valuations, your GDVs always err on the side of being conservative, every single time. But Joshua, can I make a suggestion? This is a fundraising exercise as much as an educational one. If people want information from me, then yes, I'll give, as an offer here, can I give 30 minutes to anybody that wants it? And in return, a donation to the NHS. And if we say 30 minutes is available, what's a reasonable amount of money to pay for that as a donation? Let's keep it on the lower side to help people.
Yeah, I'd say minimum £50, but the higher the better. You know, yeah, pretty at least
Okay.
maybe even 100 at least. You know, that's.
Should we make it £30? Make it really
£30.
cheap. Make it really cheap. Make it really affordable. That's £1 a minute. And anybody that wants time, we'll cap it at 30 minutes. I'm happy to do that, to talk them through. So anybody that wants to donate £30, I'll donate 30 minutes of my time to enable you to raise some funds. So if anybody's interested, please contact Joshua. Joshua, feel free to give my direct telephone number out to anybody that wants it once you've received the £30.
Yeah, what we'll do is everybody, donate at least £30 now. Take a screenshot, email it to me at joshua@jsmpartners.co.uk. Put in the subject line Chris Hamilton. Make sure you put that in there so I know when I'm looking through my emails. Put that in the subject line, and then what I'll do is I'll send Chris a list over with everyone's to put your telephone number in there as well with a screenshot, and I'll send that over to Chris for him to do that. That really is a valuable call. I'm probably even going to book one myself. Is that allowed? Can I book a call if I donate £30?
If you're donating to the NHS, absolutely, Joshua. Yes.
Definitely. We've been on this for 45 minutes, and I've literally got, I've been scribbling down notes. I've got little pages here. It's been some really valuable information. And we're not even over yet. So make sure everyone's donating that. So it's bit.ly/. Help the NHS, I believe is a link that goes straight through to the Virgin Giving page. So you can just donate there, send the screenshots into joshua@jsmpartners.co.uk, Chris Hamilton as the subject line, and also include your phone number and secure one of those spaces.
Absolutely. And obviously, if it's 300 people, please don't expect the phone call within half an hour. So we will get on with it. Where else are we? Any other questions on this?
So I suppose, yeah, this is probably a nice-ish place to kind of wrap things up almost, would be kind of, what would you suggest as a project for a first-time permitted device developer? So someone who's just getting started, they were looking to take advantage of this. What would you suggest in the kind of place that they start looking?
Okay, there's two items there. One is, obviously it depends very much on the location, but my suggestion is town centres, and the town centres usually, because they've got good facilities around them, good facilities being transport links, which are absolutely essential for first-time buyers. So any city, just about any city or any major town in the country, the closer to the town centre, the better. The closer to a train station, the better. If you can find properties under £1 million purchase price, then I would certainly be looking at those. That you can do solo. The issue you're always going to have is equity. Now, there are providers that will do even 100% equity. So some of those providers will take obviously the lion's share of the profit. But if the profit is substantial, so what? If you're still going to make, typically, I don't know, let's just say you make £100,000 or £200,000, so what if they take 800,000 quid? If it gets you on the ladder and you still make a reasonable amount of money, it doesn't matter. So as long as people are practical about it, you can get 100% funding. Now, typically with 100% funding, people will take 60% or more of the profit. The downside to that is very often they will want a PG, a personal guarantee, that is significant. And you should not be giving a PG, obviously, on your family home. That obviously makes common sense, but some people don't actually understand that that can actually happen to people. So if you're looking at another project, joint venture with somebody, we joint venture, every single development HPG have done has been a joint venture. So people bring finance, they bring the project, they will bring something to the party. So as long as you've understood what you're looking for and you understand how to maximize it, then yes, virtually anything can work. You've just got to understand what can be converted to what. And perhaps if people are doing a one-to-one phone call, I can take them through all their options and send them a schedule of what they can actually convert from something to something, depending on what their preferred strategy is. Don't forget, also bearing in mind, if you can get a 25% profit on the project, you can actually refinance it, usually without too much difficulty, and hang on to it. So therefore, obviously, gaining financial benefits that are ongoing. And looking at what we're doing at the moment, what we've been talking about, obviously people can retain it, not just for rental purposes, but for commercial properties as well, serviced offices as a typical, for instance. And instead of doing one house at a time or one building at a time, suddenly you're into multiple units, multiple offices, for instance, multiple flats. So it can be a very significant benefit financially for people. If somebody does JV with ourselves or some of the other people, I mean, I've seen that some of the other people on this, these talks who I can thoroughly endorse, people like Ranjan Bhattacharya, Mark Stokes, those sort of people, very good, decent people to work with. And they will also help as well. It's not just myself, other people will help as well. So if people need help with assessing a property, please make sure you speak to somebody that can actually make sure that the strategy you're following is really viable. Yes, they are. A lot of them are extremely good. Some of them are not so good. So it's understanding what you're doing. Absolutely critical. We have time for one last question?
Yeah, let's see if we've got one more.
Or several quick ones.
What we got? Okay. So, how do you search? How do you source properties? Do you go through commercial agents? Try and go direct to vendor? What's your kind of best route to get in touch and start the negotiation?
Bizarrely, most of the properties I buy are actually straight off Rightmove. And the
Okay.
reason they're very good off Rightmove is people just don't realise the opportunities. So typically, one of the properties we looked at and we actually bought, and we're coming out of exiting right at the moment, the building had originally been seen to have 9 one-bedroom flats in it. But we realised with very high ceilings, we could actually lower the floors inside, and we actually went from 9 one-bedroom to 9 one-bedroom and 5 two-beds. So suddenly it went from a commercial disaster to a commercial success. But it's understanding how to see the benefits in buildings. But to answer the main questions, most of our buildings are straight off Rightmove. I don't believe there's such a thing as direct-to-vendor exclusivity. I think anybody that thinks that is, if it's a really good deal, why would somebody go direct to vendor? It just wouldn't be. They'll put it to the market and see what the best price is. What they really mean is it's only gone to 2 or 3 sources, and each of those sources in turn is only gone to 50 of his contacts. So when you think you're direct to vendor, no, there's something's not quite right. No owner is going to sell his property unless there's absolute 24-hour type desperation. It's not going to happen. So I don't believe in that. It will happen maybe once in a blue moon, and people will tell that story for the rest of their life as if it's normal everyday occurrence. It doesn't happen. So yes, direct to vendor is nice if you can find it, but normally it's building a relationship with a commercial agent and using the main websites, Estates Gazettes, for instance, Rightmove, those sort of places. They do have, and of course, not to forget, the marketplace, like even eBay or Gumtree, even have properties on them as well. But it's realizing the potential of a building. And with the way we are at the moment with commercial properties, a lot of those are going to be coming onto the market. They've maybe bought 15, 20, 30 years ago. And the value of them in, I'm guessing, September is going to be significantly lower when people are left with empty buildings or facing empty buildings than it was September 19. So I do believe there's going to be some serious opportunities arising in the next 6 months, especially. Position yourself, get your investors on board, and be prepared to move in. So if you make 30 offers that are rejected, so what? If the 31st one is accepted with a significant saving, it doesn't matter. It's the end number that counts. And you will be going through a lot of buildings where people initially reject you, keep the relationship, wait for them to come back to you in 6 months' time.
Yeah, wow, incredible. So at the moment, kind of just get everything in position, and then really, there's going to be some great opportunities in the next couple of months. Had someone ask for your Twitter? Are you on Twitter at all?
I can put myself on Twitter, but I'm not at the moment.
Okay. So how can people kind of connect with you, start following your content, and kind of get in touch?
Can I give my email?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, it's chris@hamiltonpg.com. So I'll give that again, Chris, CHRIS, Chris at Hamilton, HAMILTONPG.com. So
Perfect.
if anybody wants, or they can find me on Facebook, Chris Hamilton, as well. Or on, obviously, if people got my contact number through WhatsApp as well, but they need my contact number for that.
Perfect. And just to remind everybody, if you donate at least £30, Chris is offering a 30-minute phone call to go through kind of whatever you need to run through in terms of commercial conversions and kind of help where he can on that. Just send a screenshot of your donation with your telephone number to Joshua at JSM Partners. We posted all of that here. Other than that, guys, I'm happy to wrap that up. That was absolutely phenomenal. The feedback we've had is incredible. Somebody said if they were wearing a hat, it would be taken off right now. Hats off. That was, you know,
Thank you.
you know, really appreciate you taking the time out for this. It's really been great. And I will be booking a call and donate another £30 to NHS to get on that.
Joshua, I'd like to say thank you very much for organising this. I think the initiative was fantastic. And to everybody listening, taking part, thank you guys for putting up with me. It's been a fantastic opportunity. Thanks so much, Joshua.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so yeah, feel free in the bottom corner and leave the meeting.